Hi everyone, I'm back. I took a much needed break after the war with Iran. I felt afterwards that I was not in my center, I was not aligned. I talk a lot about alignment. For me, alignment is when you are connected to your soul and connected to God, and everything that comes from that place is better. Ideas, creation, conversation with people, thought processes. And I was not there, and rather than force content out of obligation, I wanted to live by the insights that I share and to actually practice what it is I talk about. So I took some time to be and to spend time with family and to read Torah for my own pleasure and honestly for my own rejuvenation. And I feel like myself again, and I found some alignment again, thank God. So here I am. I want to talk about the Parashat we read last Shabbat, 2 days ago. It's Parashat Titzei. It's around a topic I find really fascinating, and it's this topic of the Yetzer Hara, or the evil inclination. More and more, I find that I can map concepts in the Torah to concepts that I've learned across psychology and neuroscience and quantum physics. And the Yetzer Hara is not an exception to this. So the Yetzer Hara is the name for the evil inclination. It's a energy or a force that exists inside of us. And the reason this force exists inside of us, and we're not just all naturally good all the time, is so that we have choice. If it were easy to be good all the time, and if it were easy to be aligned all the time, then we wouldn't have free will. And a very core element in Judaism and in the Torah is one of free will. So when we have energy that exists inside of us called the evil inclination, it gives us an opportunity to choose good. So the parasha starts, it's Parashat Titzei, and it starts, Ki Titzei la milchama al oivecha. When you go out to the war on your enemies. And then the parasha continues, and it talks about taking people captive, and there's some framework and rule around that. But I want to focus on the first few words because that's where the mystic insight exists. The question is, why does it say Ki titzei la milchama when you go out to the war, and not Ki titzei lemilchama, when you go out to a war, right? So if the Torah was talking about rules of war, you would think that the first pasuk would, start off by talking about going to war in general, to any war. What is this idea of the war? And the Zohar and the Kabbalists actually say that this pasuk references our lifelong, never-ending, and daily battle with this evil inclination, with Yetzer Hara. So the war is the internal battle and the internal challenge that we confront all the time against the evil inclination so that we can choose good. Now, what is evil? That's probably a whole topic unto itself. But in Hebrew, again, evil inclination is yetzer, which comes from the word yetzira, or creative. So it's like a creative force. Yetzer hara. Ra means bad or evil in this case. And another thing that the Kabbalists say is that Ra actually stands for Rak le'atzmi. As Ra is Resh Ayin, and it stands for Rak le'atzmi, only for myself. So what is evil, mystically speaking, or according to the way of the Torah? Evil is when we desire something and it is entirely self-focused. We desire something and think entirely about ourselves. So I want money, and I want money for myself so that I feel good and important, and so that I could buy all these things for myself. And I don't care how I get this money. I don't care how I make other people feel along the way. That's what I want, and I'm going to do whatever I want with that desire. This in Judaism is considered ra, bad, okay? Now, what's really interesting is that the Torah and Judaism does not shut down the desire for pleasure, and it does not shut down physical and material desire. To the contrary, we are actually meant and designed to enjoy the physical world and to pursue material pleasure. Our desire gives us insight into where we're supposed to go. It is a life force, and it's actually, desire is God's way of talking through us and showing us where we need to go. So the idea is not to repress desire. It's more that the way we engage with the physical world and how we pursue material and physical pleasure matters. It has to be done in consideration of the other. And a very core idea in Kabbalah, it's probably one of the principal ideas in Kabbalah, is it's based on this idea of we're supposed to desire to receive in order to give, okay? So the desire is important. We're meant to want things. We're meant to want to receive things. And yet we're supposed to think about receiving in the context of then sharing it outward. So Ra is when we take our desire and focus it on ourselves entirely. Now, what's super cool about the Parashat, okay, because the Torah, is designed. It's like, I think it is intelligent design manifest. Everything is structured. Every letter and every paragraph is structured intentionally. But after that first pasuk, ki titzei la milchama, when you go out to the war, there is literally simply an array of mitzvot or commandment that follow, okay? So this parasha is loaded with mitzvot. I think it's one of the most loaded with mitzvot parshiot. Commandments on behavior. And what's fascinating is if you look at these mitzvot, it looks like they're effectively exercises or practices in self-restraint to help you conquer your yetzer hara, your evil inclination. So I'm going to share two. One in Hebrew is called shiluach haken. In English, it's sending away a mother bird. The pasuk reads, the pasuk reads, כי יקרא כאן ציפור לפניך בדרך בכל עץ, או על הארץ אפרוחים או ביצים, והאם רובצת על האפרוחים או על הביצים, לא תיקח האם על הבנים. תשלח את האם ואת הבנים תיקח לך, למען ייטב לך וערכת ימים. Okay, so what is this parasha saying? Or this pasuk? It's talking about a circumstance where you run into a nest full of eggs. And we as humans are meant to and want to eat those eggs. And yet the mother bird is still hanging out above the nest. She's still in proximity of the nest, and in fact, she's still sitting on top of the eggs. The commandment is that you may not take the eggs as long as the mother is there. In fact, you're supposed to send the mother away, and you can only take the eggs if she doesn't return, okay? What's the idea? We are allowed to want the eggs, and we're allowed to take the eggs. We are here to enjoy the physical world, and we are here to experience pleasure. And yet we must practice self-restraint. We can't do it however and whenever we please. There needs to be exercising of thoughtfulness and consciousness and recognizing the surroundings embedded in your calculus. The next pasuk. כי תבנה בית חדש ועשית מעקה לגגיך ולא תשים דמים בביתך כי ייפול הנופל ממנו. When you build yourself a new house, you must make a fence around the roof in order to prevent a visitor from falling off and injuring themselves. So again, we are meant to build ourselves a house if we want. We are meant to enjoy new things. And at the same time, in our pursuit and enjoyment of those new things, we need to practice considering the other and making sure that our pleasure doesn't come at the expense of someone else. So these mitzvot throughout the parasha are literally practices in self-restraint and practices in thoughtfulness as we engage in physical and material pleasure. As we pursue our desire, it's important to think about our desire in the context of our surroundings and of the other. Now, I talked about neuroscience in the beginning of this video because it's something that I've been studying in the past couple of years. When I read this parasha and started thinking about the evil inclination and yetzer hara, which is effectively exercising desire for the self alone, it immediately made me think about a concept in neuroscience called the dopamine trap. So dopamine is this chemical released by the brain that effectively, it's part of a reward system that creates a feedback loop that tells a human being, keep doing what you're doing. So when we eat for nutrition, our brain releases dopamine, it feels good, and we're effectively trained to eat again. So it's the brain's way of conditioning us to continue doing something that's good for us. Now, at the same time, the brain releases dopamine when we engage in pleasure that is not good for us. Drugs release dopamine. Alcohol releases dopamine. Our screens, scrolling through social media, getting likes, all of these release dopamine, but they release or they create spikes in dopamine. So what happens is when we engage in or indulge in pleasures like the ones I just mentioned, effectively what happens is we experience a spike of dopamine in the brain, and afterwards there's a commensurate crash, and we need more and more and more of that thing in order to get to baseline. So dopamine, in fact, and that whole system is a culprit in addiction. And what I realized, or what I believe, is that the yetzer hara, our evil inclination, feeds off the dopamine trap. So when you engage in pleasure for the self alone, or when you pursue desire for the self alone without consideration of the other, desire that is entirely self-serving, my theory is that we actually experience a spike in dopamine that afterwards crashes and makes us feel empty. It's momentary pleasure that is followed with a feeling that is really not fun, a feeling like a twisted feeling of discomfort and emptiness, and a feeling that leads you to need to chase or to have more of that thing that you were having. So it led me to realize that one way to identify when it's your Yetzer Hara at play is to simply notice how you feel after engaging in certain activity. For me, when you're acting from alignment with God, when you give or share consciously from purity of intention, to the point of the Torah, when you engage in pleasure, but pleasure that's communal and considerate, I find that we feel expansive afterwards. Like there's this sense of wholeness and fullness. Whereas when you engage in the pursuit of pleasure for the self alone, there's almost always this immediate, crash and a sense of like a void that needs to be filled afterwards, and it feels quite bad. So I actually believe that the brain and the body are sort of barometers that guide you and show you what is driving your behavior. Is it your conscious self, or is it the Yetzer Hara? It's really interesting. So that's this last week's Parashat Titzei. And I hope to return to a more consistent sharing of insights, and also intend to continue to share from a place of inspiration and authenticity, and to not try and force content, because I don't believe in that. Thank you. Bye.